and has been doing research in linguistics for many, many years. And in the past 10 years has been more focused on Basque. And this is a really passionate project for her. So she's really happy to be here to share her research with everyone. So thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Rebecca, and thank you all so much for having me here. It is a real pleasure to speak to this audience. I know many of you have grown up hearing Basque all around you, speaking Basque, and I think it's one of the most amazing languages that I've ever had the chance to study, and I've looked at many hundreds of languages, so saying a lot. Today, I picked a topic that I thought would be of interest to people here. And this is a special part of the Basque vocabulary, words related to bees and trees and prickly plants. I have a lot to say, so I'm just going to get right into it. And there will be time for questions afterwards. So I have some slides here at the beginning which really just go over some basic facts about the Basque language that many of you will already know. The language is spoken today by maybe as many as 1 million people. Of course, there are many other people who we would say are passive speakers of Basque. They don't actually speak the language, but they understand it. It's spoken here in the Basque Country, as well as other little outposts like Idaho in the United States. There are still 7 different dialects remaining of the language, which is really important for linguistics because there's dialect diversity here, and that can shed a lot of light on the past. There was an ancient language, Aquitanian, that was spoken in this area as well. And all linguists seem to agree that Aquitanian is related to modern Basque. And so these 2 languages are sometimes together called Euskarian as a little family, a mini family, shall we say. The Aquitanian that we know about is all in Latin texts dating from about 0 to 300 Common Era. And of course, there was a recent find of something going back before the Common Era dates to about 100 before the present, and that is this hand of Iruregi, which has some Basque words, including Sorionek. So Sorionak, if that's the word, well, we can say that today. There are lots of birthdays. And then we have many place names all over the Basque Country and things that aren't even considered the Basque Country farther north. There are many names. Names retain ancient features of language, so they're also very important in linguistics. And with all of the data that we have in linguistics, if you go to a class on general linguistics, historical linguistics, the first thing you will hear about Basque is this. Basque is an isolate. It is unrelated to any other language except Aquitanian. It is unrelated to any other language. So this is like a unique feature in Europe. There are no other isolates. And that's made it of great interest to people studying historical linguistics. Could it be related to another language? This is a map of dialects. Some of the ones that are most conservative are far to the east of here. For instance, in the eastern Suvaroa, in the far east, there is still pronunciation of the H sound, which is written often in words, but not pronounced, for instance, in Vizcaya. Here's a little map of Aquitanian. If you look at the white outline here, you see Aquitanian was spoken even as far north as modern day Bordeaux in France, and far to the east as well. So this is a much bigger area, which of course, if you're interested in climate and ecology, makes a big difference, right? Because as you go north, there are fewer mountains, pine woods, and so on that don't exist in this part. And certain trees, I'm sure there are people here that know a lot more about trees than I do, but birch trees, beech trees, they come down to the Pyrenees and then they stop. Okay, so if you're interested in those words, you may say, aha, well, it makes sense to have those words because Basque was spoken somewhere farther north. When someone says that a language is an isolate, for those of you who heard my earlier talk, I'm just sort of racing through this because you know this already, but an isolate is opposed to a language that is part of a bigger family. Languages that descend from the same mother tongue are related and they form what we call a language family. The mother language is usually called a proto-language. In the world, we have established over 200 language families in linguistic science, and one of these is Indo-European. Indo-European is the mother language of most of the Western European languages, the Celtic languages, the Romance languages, the Slavic languages, etc. So this is a picture of the Indo-European family tree, and you see the mother node is labeled Proto-Indo-European. When you say something is a language isolate, that's a language that has no known relatives. Basque is supposed to be an isolate. And this, we can see in this tiny little table, why many people, you know, if you just look through basic words in a language, words like father, number words, words for body parts, and words for kinship terms, these are very basic common words that tend not to be borrowed. If you go across, we have Vedic Sanskrit, Greek, Latin. Those are all Indo-European languages. This has been established by historical methods we have. And if you look at the first sound of the word for father, you see pitar, pater, pater, and then Basque has aite. Okay, so there's no P there. Now, of course, P could have been lost, something like that could happen. But the point here is that there are correspondences across the Indo-European languages that don't go into Basque, right? There's nothing that looks similar here. I've got the P highlighted because that's the correspondence we're interested in here. P in Vedic corresponds to P in Greek, corresponds to P usually in Latin, except for the word for five, which has a little exception going on. And there are hundreds of these correspondences established for the Indo-European languages. There are many other isolates in the world. What makes Basque unique is that it's the only isolate in Europe. And so you see on the map there, Basque versus these Indo-European languages, Celtic languages, Germanic languages, Romance languages, and all of those languages have also had contact with Basque. So I took on the job of actually trying to reevaluate this hypothesis that Basque was an isolate, but I wanted to do it in the only way we know how to do things in linguistic science, which is starting with the reconstruction of Proto-Basque, the oldest form of the Basque language. How could I go farther back than other people? Many people have worked on this problem. So I took the methods that I know of and I used my training and knowledge of historical phonology to come up with a new reconstruction of the Proto-Basque language. This was based on excellent work preceding myself, right? We all sort of stand on the shoulders of giants, and these are some of the giants in the field who have sort of paved the way for today's research in this area. Most recently, a student of mine, Ander Erutsegi, whose name is here at the bottom, he was the one who actually introduced me to Basque historical phonology. He was a PhD student of mine and who got me interested in this field. There are many, many lexical resources on the Basque language. An incredible amount of information is known about the vocabulary. There are also compendiums of Aquitanian, this ancient language. There are now compendiums of place names, family names. So I would say that, Basque is a very well documented language, which means we can do a lot of good linguistic work on it. So in 2018, I published this book, Advances in Proto-Basque Reconstruction, with evidence for the Proto-Indo-European Euskarian hypothesis, where I presented my new reconstruction of Proto-Basque, sound correspondences between Proto-Basque and Proto-Indo-European, and a hypothesis that these two languages could be distantly related. Here's the hypothesis in short. There are regular sound correspondences between Proto-Basque and Proto-Indo-European, including basic vocabulary, and that these sound correspondences point to a genetic relationship. That is the fact that these two proto-languages descend from the same source. This is a radical hypothesis. I'm now working on a sequel to this book where I have new reconstructions, new grammatical features, and some of the work I'm presenting today is actually part of the book that will appear. These are sound correspondences. I don't expect you to look at these very closely, but it's here if we want to get back to this later. As well as some reconstructed roots. Look at the first one. Okay, we're here talking about plants today. The hel in Proto-Indo-European is a root that's been reconstructed, agreed upon by thousands of linguists. It means to thrive, bloom, blossom, but it is the base of many words that have to do with leaves and plants. And I believe there is a cognate root in Proto-Basque. So, okay, this is sort of the beginning of today's talk. What do these things have to do with you or people like you, your colleagues in the world? I think there's a lot of value of some of the new Basque etymologies I have. First of all, they will provide us with a general enrichment of our understanding of the past. Second, they illuminate Basque views of the natural world, and so I'll be talking about some of those. They also suggest Proto-Basque terms for flora, fauna, and geographical features that may be clues to ancient homeland and or migration routes, if there was one. And finally, they give focus to indigenous terms that may have been replaced by dominant languages, in particular Romance languages like Spanish, and that might be reintroduced in the context of BC3 work or other initiatives. Okay, so I want to start with our friend, the bee. The word in Basque is ele, elea. And this specific species, Apis mellifera, right? This is the one that lives in this part of the world. I guess it's sometimes called the European black bee. So why am I starting with the bee? Okay. First of all, no one who's working on the internal history of the Basque language has an etymology for this word. So it's etymology unknown. Okay. Erle is erle. Secondly, the bee seems to be of cultural importance to the Basque people. And finally, it has like an interesting sound pattern. So I'm sort of a sound person. So I'm like, well, where did this RL cluster come from? Because there are not many words in Basque that have R followed by L. So, the background of these tables will not be of interest to you. This is like my painstaking work over weeks and weeks, looking for words that may be related, that may have the same root, trying to understand what sound changes have occurred. I already talked to you about the H. The H in Basque is very important. It's still pronounced in the Eastern varieties. It's not pronounced in other varieties, but it is often written, for instance, in the OEH dictionary. In any case, we can reconstruct a root of the form head. That's how it would have been pronounced in Proto-Basque with the H. And that root would be the root of all of the words at the top of this table above where it says PIE. So these words form what we might call a little word family. They all have the basic root, that they share a basic root. And this might be maybe surprising to you. The root means something like sick or suffering until we think about the second word here, erile, one that offers sacrifice. So what are you doing when you offer sacrifice? You're sort of hurting yourself, right? You are cleaning yourself. And now look at the relationship between erile, and I don't expect Basque speakers to know all of these words because some of these are archaic words that are not really used very much anymore. But compare this to erle, and we see there's a missing vowel in the middle of the word. Well, actually, these short, unstressed vowels are often lost in the history of the Basque language. For instance, if you look at two words like andere, andre, right? The word for lady, which also happens to be a word for queen bee. So that's a nice word. But the point here is we can relate these, which means essentially that the word for bee, that etymology could be a change in meaning from one who sacrifices themselves to the bee. Okay. We'll look at why this may be the case soon, but first notice there is a Proto-Indo-European cognate here. Okay, so there is a word that means sick or miserable in the same sense as the root reconstructed here. Okay, so the new etymology may shed light on aspects of the ancient Basque worldview. The European honeybee does sting. The stinging is a defensive behavior that the worker bees use to what? Protect the entire bee colony. The stinger of the bee has barbs on it that make the bee unable to pull its stinger out. And when it tries to pull the stinger out to get away, it actually ruptures its abdomen, its stomach, and then it dies. Usually it dies. Okay. So in this way, worker bees can be seen to sacrifice themselves to protect the hive, offering their lives in defense of the colony. And I think it's possible that respect for this behavior, this sense of community that the bees have, could be related to the etymology of this word. The sacred status of Erleak in Basque folklore is widely known. There's a recent film that came out, I think, I don't know the name in Spanish, 20,000 Species of Bees. Very moving film. In any case, there's some of this in that film. Destroying a beehive in the olden days was a sin punishable by amputation of a limb. That seems very parallel to the bee losing its stinger. In olden times, bees had to be traded or given away. They could not be bought or sold. In a sense, then, they were truly priceless. Bees were thought to be connected to the afterlife. Bees were talked to. They were addressed in the same way people were addressed. And as many of you know, when the head of a household died, the bees were told. There was a formal announcement to the bees by someone close to the deceased, and often someone would tap the hive and say the Basque words, which are written here. This talking to bees is actually known in other parts of Western Europe and actually as far east as Slavic-speaking areas. So this is not unique to the Basque people to talk to bees, but some of these other, I think, properties are. Here's a photograph of two people in mourning, and you can see the beehives on the left-hand side. So if we can trace a word back in time to an old inherited root, like this head in Basque, and if that root is in turn argued to be cognate with Proto-Indo-European head, well, Proto-Indo-European was thought to be spoken at least 6,000 years ago in the Pontic-Caspian steppes, far, far to the east of here. If Basque Erle has this ancient heritage, then maybe there are other old properties of bee words that reflect this. And of course, I'm interested in sound patterns and learning things from the sounds of words. And in my 2018 book, I came up with what I thought was an ancient property of the Basque language, and that is that ancient Basque did not have two different sounds, S and Z. Okay, this is a distinction that's now being lost in many modern Basque varieties or confused or whatever. But this contrast between S and Z was certainly one that's been reconstructed by everyone who works on the Basque language. So what I am saying is that in Proto-Basque, it wasn't a distinction between S and Z, it was a distinction between S and S followed by another consonant at the beginning of a root. So instead of today, where someone would say shu, shu for fire, the old form was shu. But for wood, okay, if you have a word like sura, the old form was stura with an ST cluster at the beginning. Okay, if you want to know more about that, you can look at my book or the forthcoming book. There's a lot of evidence for this proposal. I'll just give you two words that you can remember. Ashtuna and asuna. Asuna is an old word that people don't use very much anymore, but it was used to talk about pregnant animals on the farm. And ashtuna, you would know, ashtun means heavy, something that is heavy, but it can also be used for someone who is very pregnant. Okay, so that's what we call a doublet in linguistics, two words that actually come from the same source. They have very overlapping meanings, okay, but one has undergone a sound change and one has not. The form that has the Z has undergone the sound change of ST to Z, but the other form has not. Okay, so that's enough of linguistics, I think. Now, why is this of interest? Because I have reconstructed the Proto-Basque word for old. In modern Basque, zar or tsar, it's spelled Z-A-H-A-R. It's pronounced differently in different varieties. It's a very common word, okay? My reconstruction has an initial ST cluster. I was very surprised to find instances of STAR in words for bees, in particular, the drone bee. So if you go into the dictionary and look up elastar, you will find a definition, zangano, what's it called in Spanish? Zangano, something like that, okay? The drone bee. The drone bee is the one who doesn't do anything. Like you could call it, oh, that old bee. That's not the worker bee, right? Actually, it has a very important role because it impregnates the queen. But from the working perspective, it doesn't do much. So it could be called an old bee. But what's interesting about this word is that it's highlighted here. It has the ST cluster, okay? And that makes it look like an old word. And as if that wasn't enough, and this is my collection of cards where I learn, insects and plants and things like that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's become the word for bee for many people, obviously, because this just means bumblebee, right? This means bee. And asara, I don't know, is there anyone here who would use this word for bee? For bumblebee. For bumblebee. Okay, great. So it used to be the drone bee in the honeybee nest that wasn't making any honey. Maybe now it's just used for a bee, not to say that it's a worker bee. So, yeah. And this is one's a little bit more complicated, but there is a word, Erlakistein or Erlastein, bumblebee or wasp, where we have a suffix, which today is pronounced as sain. And that is the suffix that talks about looking after, guarding, protecting, and so on. Very common productive suffix in modern Basque. Well, in the word for bee, which I think originally came from Erashaski, like the one who watches the hive, that is an ST cluster as well. The oldest form of this word looks like it has an ST cluster. So there are two bee words that retain ST. At the bottom of this slide, you'll also see there are some family names that are common in Basque, like Aragistein, which also seem to retain the ST cluster with the same meaning, that is, one who's looking after something. Okay. Eleak, well, this map, I'm sorry, you can't read the fine print here, but this map shows some words for bees all over Europe. And you can see the Basque country is yellow because it doesn't share an etymology with other countries. The word is unique. It seems to be old. It seems to be heritage. It seems to be unique. And the bees are unique too. There's a Basque organization, Erbel, Association of Black Bee Breeders, that is working to improve and conserve the local bee. So, sorry. Yeah. I guess what I wanted to say with respect to the relating Proto-Basque to Proto-Indo-European is that just because we say two ancient language families are related, that doesn't mean we're not saying that the Basque language family is not unique in so many ways, both in terms of things like these vocabulary words and in terms of the worldview that it represents, which is quite unique, I think. So here's another example. This is a photo of some what we call Scots pine in English. This is another word where you can see the H, how important it is. The oldest form of this word, I believe, is Leher of the attested forms that we have. When we reconstruct, we may find it slightly different. The H has dropped out. Some varieties of Basque, like in Gipuzkoa, you can hear the longer vowel, whereas here I don't think you do in Biscay. So there is also no etymology for this word, as far as I know. No one has proposed an etymology. This is new. In my reconstruction of Proto-Basque, there is a regular change of D to L at the beginning of the word. So one thing you may notice about modern Basque is most of the words that begin with D are either borrowed or they're verbs, like da, da, go, and things like that, or they're borrowed. Otherwise, there's no D because D went to L and in some cases, in other cases, was lost. Okay, so what's the etymology here? Well, this root is sort of interesting, right? It just means something that there's a lot of, abundant, numerous thing. That's what it seems to mean. And that meaning of numerous, abundant, shifted to something like beauty, very beautiful. And so we have words like eder, right? The common word for beautiful, which has this root in it, and then also can mean still numerous, abundant in certain uses. MB there is medieval Basque, so these are just some people's names, and then the Basque word ler or ler is still used to mean in extreme abundance, bursting with something greatly. And then we have this word for Scots pine, which is sort of interesting. What's it doing there? I'm saying that the meaning, numerous, abundant, shifted over time to mean Scots pine. There is a Proto-Indo-European cognate. It means the same thing, like much, many, in heaps, large quantity. So what do we learn about the Basque world view here? I think it's really interesting. Modern science has actually determined that this tree is the most widely distributed pine species in the world, number one. And number two, in terms of stands of trees, the Scots pine has the biggest stands of an individual species of any tree in the world. Those are two facts about this tree. So both in its extent across land masses in the world and in its extent across, mountain ranges and things in certain areas, this tree is abundant and extensive. Here's a map of the distribution of this pine across Europe and Eurasia. So you can see it's very widespread. So again, this word ler, it's old, it's inherited, it's unique. I've looked at the words for pine in many other languages, and none of them seem to relate to this feature of the pine, its extensiveness. Of course, there are many words that are derived from this word in Basque. Basque has very productive word formation processes. So, but you know, some of these I think also allow us to look inside the mind and, you know, how people are thinking about things. Lerden, right? Straight, tall, upright. That's interesting because that's the way these trees are. That's one of my, in a Native American language that I worked on, that's what they called me, like lodgepole pine, like that. And then we have like lerki, which is interesting. There's a tea that's made from pine branches. I'm not sure that's done anymore, but this word exists in the Basque language. Lerro, what about that word? That's interesting. Line, row. No one has an etymology for this, but this is the way pines grow, very much in a line. And then an animal, the tsun. This is the crane. If you've seen a crane standing, you know what the legs look like, right? They look like pine trees. Finally, we have actually 2 other tree names. So we can learn about some tree word etymologies from understanding others. So for the Basque, there maybe was a relationship between ler, this tree, and lerchun, which is the trembling aspen or poplar. And for a long time, I did not know what this chun was. And then I started thinking about all of the words in other languages which refer to what the leaves do. Sometimes it's visual that you see trembling, but sometimes it's sound symbolic. And chun 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 is the sound symbolic word in Basque for the sound of a tambourine. Okay, so we would describe that as maybe rattling or rustling. And then I have a question mark about alerce, which is the word for the European larch tree, because I'm currently working on this. But interestingly, the Latin word, which you see there, larix, has no good Indo-European etymology. So this could be a word that was borrowed from Basque into other languages. I think I'm going to skip that and go to the next tree because I have to talk about Alzak. The alder tree, the alder tree. This is just a picture of sheep, but they are nibbling on the leaves of the alder. You see how that sheep is saying, oh, yum, yum, yum. I want some more of this. No one I know has a good etymology of Alz, the word for alder, although some people have suggested that it's borrowed from Indo-European. I don't think that's the case. I think that this root, H-A-L, hal, nourish, raise, feed, graze, can be securely reconstructed for Proto-Basque. What makes me say that? Well, at least the first word here and the third word, Allah, which has a historic H, which actually underwent what we call metathesis. It shifted position from the beginning to the position after the L. And halka or halga, which is a word actually for wild oats forage. And then this word alts, which has a canonical form in the Proto-Basque that I've reconstructed, and it would mean literally that thing which nourishes, that which is nourishing. This root also has a Proto-Indo-European cognate, and at the bottom of this slide, I say that, the etymology for Alsak relates it to one of its notable properties, namely that it can serve as fodder for livestock when the grasses are not available. And in this case, I think the Basque etymology actually shed some light on the Indo-European etymology, because people reconstruct this form, ali, it's actually would have been pronounced aliso in Proto-Indo-European for alder, but it's 3 syllables, and most Indo-European roots are 1 syllable. So it looks like a complex word, okay? It looks like it probably has the same root as the Basque word. And so this sheds light on the Indo-European. Some more notes about the Basque worldview. In the Basque country, these alder trees, Alsak, provide food and shelter for wild and domestic animals throughout the year. In the summer, the sheep and goats get protein from alder leaves. In the winter, birds can feed on the seeds. Deer and rabbits and sheep feed on the tree branches. So this etymology suggests that the Basque farmers of ancient times really understood this. Did they also know that alder trees nourish the soil? I don't know, but we know now that alders improve soil fertility by fixing nitrogen from the air via this special bacteria that grows in their roots and not in the roots of other trees. And interestingly today, as again, many of you know much better than I do, agroforestry seeks to photosynthesize farmland by integrating trees and shrubs, and they do this in pasture land and cropland with alders as one of their top choices. I'm going to leave like 15 minutes for questions at the end. Okay, so amets, I think I talked briefly about amets in my earlier talk here. The black oak, this is a tree that's indigenous mainly to the Basque country and surrounding areas. And it was important to me because of the M in the middle of the word, which I claim was a sound in Proto-Basque, that Proto-Basque had the M sound, and other people have debated that with me. They say there was no M. So I wanted to just mention it as an important tree. But it's, if we look at the etymology we have on this slide, you can see that it is named after the color black. And that would be because of the dark color of its mature tree bark, which I guess this picture is supposed to illustrate how dark the bark is of this tree. You can see the Spanish term merojo, that seems to be based also on a root for black in Latin and Greek, but my hypothesis here is that this is based originally on the Basque term. These are all words in the same family that have a root med, meaning dark color or black. I will go to the next tree because this is more of a linguistic argument than a note about the Basque worldview. This is a distribution of amets in Western Europe, and okay, let's talk about Estella, the box tree. This is a wild stand of box trees in the Basque country. There's a root, I believe, in Proto-Basque, bel. It means strength or force. This is cognate with a root in Proto-Indo-European that means the same thing, although it is not widely attested in Proto-Indo-European. And for this reason, the Basque etymology could also be of great interest generally in linguistics. What are some of the words apart from espel which may have this root? The word belatza, raptor, name applied to various birds of prey. Here, the composition is relatively transparent. there's a word for atza, which would be claw, finger, claw, and then preceding that, the word meaning strong. And some other words that have really mostly gone out of use, apart from Belsean, I guess, but none of these words are that common in modern Basque. So why would the box tree have this word for strength or force in it? Again, this, I think, displays a certain knowledge and sensitivity that this tree is named after its wood. Boxwood may be the hardest wood in all of Europe, and it's very highly valued. It's hard, it's dense, it's heavy, fine grain, resistant to splitting and chipping. Ancient speakers of Basque seem to know this because the root would literally mean strength. While the uses for boxes, tools, and other everyday items is well documented, there's been recent work in archaeology that's shown the use of this wood in Holocene artifacts from northeastern Iberia, so what would have been ancient Basque country. This includes many tools: sickle handles, digging sticks, wedges, adze handles, needles, combs, and other objects that are of unknown function. So clearly the strength of this wood has been known for thousands of years in exactly the area thought to be inhabited by speakers of the Basque language or related languages. Basque, espela. It's an old word. I'm claiming it's a unique word. And these trees, unfortunately, are presently at risk. Again, many of you know about this. I did not till I started working on the name of this tree. There's an organization, Espel Sainza, there's the word, people who take care of things, based in Navarre, and these people are working to protect Espelac and to eradicate the boxwood moth for the benefit not only of Europe, but also for North America, where this moth is invading. So the map on the upper right-hand corner here shows you areas where box trees are healthy and where they're being really destroyed by this moth. Yes, hopefully these efforts will be successful. Okay, I think maybe I have time for one last tree, Arte? Maybe not. The holm oak. Look closely at the leaves. They look like holly leaves, right? They have prickles. Maybe I will skip this and I'll go to a prickly term. I can come back to these in the question period. Okay. So this word, lara, is a word that's used to talk about prickly plants. Maybe you would translate it as bramble, like a blackberry bramble, or a hawthorn bush, thistle, prickly plant. There are lots of different translations. You can see right in the middle of the slide, the Euskara, I don't even know what we call this in English, but it's a prickly plant that looks like a sunflower. It's a this is a small sample of prickly plant words. And yeah, very small sample. Everything from Arantxa, Arantxe, right, which is a common female name in the Basque Country, Arantxa, to in the middle here, Ote, Otea, which is the word for gorse, the yellow flower. Oh, that was on the first slide. The yellow flower, and here's gorse, Ote. To Sassi, which is the word used for bramble thicket today, Sassia. And so I wanted to focus on this Ote, Otea, because this is something that a lot of people know about and talk about. Why is otea such a big thing in the Basque Country? In other parts of the world, this is considered a nuisance plant, like something you want to get rid of, not something to venerate. So, well, this is my etymology for ote. It's actually from the root pot, or the word pote, which means powerful, potent, of a living being, a living being. So what are some words that support this etymology? Apote in Basque is a word for a stallion, stud, boar that has not been castrated. So this is more of the sort of masculine potency side of the word. But apoch is also a word for an acorn. And apoche is, I'm not sure what this is doing there, blister beetle. Oh, because yes, it makes the skin blister and swell, so sort of puffing up. But the word that we have that's most interesting here is the ote word, gorse, furze, whin, argoma bush, which is associated here directly with the original word, powerful, potent. So why would the Basque people have an association between power and ote? Someone unfamiliar with the Basque Country might ask this: why gorse, a dense thorny plant, might be referred to as powerful? And I think there are many possible reasons for this feature in the Basque worldview. First, gorse is fast growing, dense, spiny. It dominates the landscape. If there's gorse, then people have to work around it, farm elsewhere, travel elsewhere. Second, gorse is a potent plant. It catapults its own seeds into the air with an audible popping noise. And I actually remember the first time I heard this in the hills outside of Gasteiz, and it's really remarkable. It's like pop, pop, and the seeds are going off. Gorse is also highly nutritious, and it was a central food source for the native pony in Pochoca in historical times. It was also used for fodder for other animals. And finally, it was valued as fuel for traditional Basque ovens, burning quickly, but with great heat and not so much ash. And here are some derived words which give you a sense of how important ote were in Basque culture. So there's a word for where you would actually take the ote, otabalts, to collect it or store it. There's a word for otasca, the last word in this list, is a table or board on which you grind or crush the ote. Okay, so I think I only have about 6 minutes left, so this may be a good time to say thank you very, very much for your attention and take questions.